So, if you're working with pharmaceuticals in Saudi Arabia, you know the drill. Getting your product approved is one mountain to climb, but changing it afterwards, that's a whole different beast. Get a simple variation wrong, and you're looking at costly rejections that can put your product on ice. Today, we're going to break down the SFDA's guidelines so that doesn't happen to you. Let's get right into it.
Okay, picture this. You did it. The marketing authorization is in hand. But business moves fast, and now you need to make a change. Maybe it's a new supplier, a tiny tweak to the process, anything. The real question is, how sure are you that your submission to the SFDA will sail through on the first try? Because for a small or medium-sized company, a rejection isn't just a piece of paper. It's a massive blow to your timeline and your bottom line. So to make sure you get it right, we've laid this out as a game plan. First, we'll cover the basic rules of the game. Then, we'll dive into the different paths you can take for your variation. We'll look at some real-life examples, build a checklist to dodge those common mistakes, and finally, we'll talk about that all-important line between a major change and a whole new registration. All right, Section 1, the rules of the game. Look, before we even start talking strategy, we have to get on the same page about the foundational, absolutely non-negotiable rules the SFDA sets out. Getting this part wrong is like trying to play chess without knowing how the queen moves. You're just setting yourself up to lose. The very first thing to burn into your brain is that this whole process is built on a specific legal foundation. The SFDA is crystal clear about this. Articles 9 and 17 of their registration rules are the bedrock. This is an optional reading, folks. Compliance here is the price of admission for any change you want to make, period. And you know, the SFDA doesn't bury the lead. They are incredibly upfront about what happens if you get it wrong. This isn't hidden in some footnote, it's a direct warning. They're not trying to catch you out. They are literally telling you, right here, what leads to rejection, messy paperwork, and picking the wrong category. They're giving you the answers to the test. So, what does getting it right actually look like? Well, the general notes section gives us a perfect pre-flight checklist. Number 1. Every single submission needs a simple table showing what we have now versus what we're proposing. Super clear. Number 2, you need a solid, data-driven scientific reason explaining why this change is happening. And number 3, don't be surprised if the SFDA comes back with questions. Be ready for it. Okay, now we get to Section 2, where the real strategy comes into play. It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about picking the right path for your change. The SFDA gives you 3 main options. And honestly, the easiest way to think about them is like a traffic light. Green means go, yellow means slow down, and red means full stop. Now, at the 30,000-foot view, all changes fall into one of 2 buckets. You've got your minor variations, which are for small tweaks with minimal impact. These are all about speed. And then you have major variations. These are for anything that could seriously touch the product's quality, safety, or efficacy. And for these, you absolutely need a green light from the regulator before you do anything. So let's talk about our green light, type IA. This is the do and tell pathway. It's designed for speed. For the smallest changes, you can actually make the change first and then tell the SFDA about it. For what they call IN changes, you have 14 days to notify them. For others, you can just bundle them up in an annual report. But, and this is a big but, speed comes with risk. You could have already implemented the change, only for the SFDA to turn around and reject it after the fact. Ouch. Next up is our yellow light, type IB. Think of this as the tell, wait, and do route. It's the cautious approach. You submit your application, but you have to wait for a set period before you can implement the change. It's a smart middle ground. It gives the SFDA a chance to review your plan, which gives you a lot more confidence before you pull the trigger. It takes a bit more patience, but it seriously cuts down your risk. And finally, our red light, type 2. The prior approval procedure. This is exactly what it sounds like, a full stop. You cannot move forward without getting explicit permission first. This is for all major changes, and here is probably the most important thing you'll hear today. The SFDA says type 2 is the default category. If your change doesn't perfectly fit the tight little boxes for type IA or IB, it's a type 2, no exceptions. When in doubt, this is your safest bet. Okay, that's enough theory. Let's get into the practical side of things. Let's see how these classifications actually play out with some real-world examples pulled straight from the SFDA's own playbook. We'll kick things off with something super common, a simple administrative change. Let's imagine the company that handles your batch release has a new name. That's it. The physical location, the people, the process, everything else is exactly the same. And check it out, the guideline is perfectly clear. For change 6.A, the classification all comes down to one condition. Site remains the same. If that condition is met, boom, it's a type IIN. It's a beautiful thing, really. A simple change gets a simple, fast process. That's how it's supposed to work. But what happens when things get a little murkier? Let's take a look at a quality change. Say you're bringing on a new manufacturer for your active substance. Now suddenly the classification isn't quite so cut and dry. And this right here is where you see the genius of the system. This one table tells the whole story. The core change is always the same, a new manufacturer, but the details change everything. If the new site is part of your company and the process is identical, that's an easy type 1. But the second you introduce a new drug master file or a substantially different route of synthesis, bam, it's an automatic upgrade to a major type 2 variation. This is proof that you have to sweat the details. Which, of course, brings us right to Section 4. To help you manage all those tricky details and avoid those expensive rejections, we've basically flipped the SFDA's warnings into a simple, practical checklist you can use every single time. So before you even think about hitting that submit button, just stop. Run through this list. 1. Is my summary in that current versus proposed table they require? 2. Is my scientific justification actually strong and backed up with real data? 3. Am I absolutely positive this is the right variation type, and have I double-checked the guidelines? 4. Is my submission clean, or did I throw in extra stuff that'll just confuse the reviewer? And finally, the big one. Have I met every single listed condition for the type I chose? Because missing just one is enough to get you rejected. And that brings us to our last section, and it's a big one, the variation registration borderline. This is all about knowing when your change is so massive, it isn't actually a variation anymore. This is the final line in the sand. You cannot cross it. The SFDA has an entire section, Appendix 2, dedicated to what are basically deal breakers. These are changes so fundamental to the product that they're not variations. They require a completely new registration from scratch. Trying to sneak one of these through as a type 2 variation is the fastest way to get an automatic rejection. So that leaves us with one last critical question that you have to ask yourself when you're dealing with your biggest changes. Before you label it a major variation, take a step back and be honest. Is this change so significant that in the eyes of the regulator, I've basically created a new product? Knowing the answer to that question will save you from making a massive strategic mistake.